Hello and welcome to another episode of the Two Stewards Show. My name's Mark. I'm here with
Brent.
Yeah, all right, that's our first
live.
skill testing question out of the way.
Mark is our newfound VP of humor
And joke development.
Yes.
Don't forget that part.
Okay.
Yeah. We're thinking of some good titles for our foundation.
For our
here.
roles.
Yeah. Our big venture. Our joint venture,
There
as
you
it
go.
were. And that's what we're going to talk about today, actually, is joint ventures. And, yeah.
Yeah, we started
how
a
do you
bit
structure them?
last
Yeah.
week. No, 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Talking about deal structures that apply to real estate. As we're getting some questions about that. People want to partner with people, or people want to expand their portfolio, or
Yep.
even get into the market and don't have enough money. So what kind of deal structures are available to you?
Right. Yeah. So we talked. Oh, excuse me. It's in the morning and I'm still
Hey,
sleepy.
chug that Coke there, Mark.
We talked a little bit about private equity and sort of the GP-LP model, which, if you're just kind of getting into real estate, you're really going to apply. But it's good to know how things are structured. So the other thing we want to talk about today is joint ventures and not, probably not big, massive deals. We're not involved in those either. So we wouldn't comment on that. But, like you're buying a house, for example, a single family unit, and you want to do some work to it. How do you go about that? What do you do? And as always, this is not legal or financial advice.
This is entertainment value only.
That's right. That's the standard disclaimer. So I guess we better be entertaining if this isn't actual legal advice, eh?
Man. Yeah.
Okay, so why would you do a joint venture, Brent?
Yeah. So there's different components to doing a real estate deal, right? Obviously, you need money, right, to be able to buy the property. You need time or availability to do the deal, to work on the property, find tenants, manage it. A lot of people think real estate is just a passive investment, but there is definitely work that needs to be done, and a lot of times there's renovations, so there's some expertise there as well that come into play. And then there's so you have money, which I guess you can break down into the cash,
Yep.
like the that you might save up for a down payment. But then there's also the qualification for the mortgage.
Yeah.
So whether or not you can have enough borrowing power to buy a property. And what was the I don't have my list in front of me.
Well, you talked about qualification, mortgage, work deal.
Yeah, and the deal is the final one there. So yeah, what is the actual property? What's the deal? Who's bringing that to the table? Who's finding that? Who's analyzing it? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, we were talking just a little bit before about Stefan Arnio. So he's a Winnipeg-based investor. He passed away a couple of years ago, I think, from cancer. Younger fella, but his firm is still active, and he wrote a little book just called Money, People, Deal, kind of breaking it down, right, to what you said, right? You need someone with money, so that's cash and qualifying power. You need somebody with expertise, that's the people side of it, and then you need a deal.
Yeah.
Right.
So and if
if
you're missing one of those things, right, and you still want to invest because you think it's a great thing to do, that's when you start looking at joint venture or some sort of partnership, right?
Yeah.
And that becomes advantageous as well because, let's say you have one or two of the pieces and you're looking for that, second or third one, and someone else might be missing the one that you bring to the table, then you have a mutually beneficial relationship, and the investment's going to make a lot of sense and benefit you both, right? Whereas you would not be able to do it together. A separate, I guess.
And I think the way that you have approached it is you kind of are providing the people and the deal side of it, right? Generally speaking, you've got the expertise, but you're also going to go find the place. And whether you're doing a joint venture or just working with an investor, right? But that's not always the case. So there are, I don't know if people have seen like the signs on phone poles, like we buy houses fast and all this stuff, right? So you have wholesalers who are people who just focus on the deal side of it. So they're going to find usually distressed properties. And some of these guys are shady, some are not, right? Some will just like really find vulnerable people, pressure them to sell their house for far under market value. And then other people will just, find good deals. And generally you're getting under market as well, but it works out for both parties. But then they're not, they're not holding on to that property. Their thing is they're going to flip it quickly. So often what they'll do is just get an agreement to purchase. They won't actually do like a full qualification and purchase, but they'll have that agreement. So from the customer, and then they're going to go find an investor who wants to take that deal. So they kind of flip that right of purchase back over to them, and then in return they take a small cut. So they might make 5, 10, 15 grand on a deal, right? But if they're looking for deals, they're finding it, they're signing it, and then they're flipping it all in like 30 days or something. That's not a bad deal, right?
Yeah.
But you got to hustle. Like you really got to be on the phone and really. So this is, I think, a bigger game, if you will, in the States. I see much more talk about people doing that in the States, but here it's not as common. But I just want to put it out there. That's another way that people can like make some money in real estate without actually putting any cash down.
Yeah. So joint ventures becomes a way for people to get into a deal or an opportunity without having all of the pieces necessary to do it on your own, right?
Yeah.
So the ones that we've done have generally gone quite well. And usually there's like the ones we've done anyways, there's two parties, right? So like we're one and the other person is the other one, right? You can start adding more and more parties to these things and they get more complex.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have two people, like maybe one's really good at construction and then the other one has a bunch of money, and then, then there's a third person who he finds deals or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And you work together. But it starts with the relationship between the parties, right? Because if you don't have a good relationship, a mutual understanding of like what you're responsible for, what you bring to the table, and the other party doesn't value that, the relationship can go sour pretty quick, because the minute you buy a piece of real estate, there's a lot of money involved.
Yeah.
And and if it goes well, there's also there could be a lot of profit there too. And people change when money goes up or down, right? Like if there's a lot, then people could, sometimes get greedy and they're like, well, I want that. And, if it goes poorly, then people
get upset.
People are quick. Afraid of loss. Yeah. So very important, I guess, to note off the top is that we want to have a legal agreement in place between the parties, right?
Yeah, even if you're just a couple of buddies buying a place.
Yeah.
People get away without it, but we've also heard of lots of times where things didn't go well. And then, what do you do? So it's not just about protecting yourself, but it's about having a previously set out framework for figuring out what to do, right? If you sit down before and you talk about it and say, like, what do we do in this scenario, this scenario, this scenario?
Yeah.
Then there's no fighting.
Yeah.
Because you've agreed on it.
And you have it on paper.
It's on paper.
Yeah.
And that should take a lot of the stress out. So even while the deal is happening, if something is going sideways or whatever, what the options are. We're going to do this, or this, based on the agreement that we already had.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can disregard the agreement and be angry, whatever. But I mean, then legally, you've got to... that's what you have to do, is follow the agreement that you set out. But I think it's a good foundation, and it sets a lot more, just gives you more confidence during the deal, I think, right? Everybody knows what their obligations are and what their rights are, and no gray areas.
Yeah. Have we hit why we want to do this enough, or?
I don't think so.
Well, ask me more questions then.
Okay,
Mark.
Brent, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to? And by the way, when Brent is involved, it's called... it's a joint venture.
Okay.
Just going to put that out there.
So for myself, how I got into joint ventures was, I done a couple properties myself, my wife and I, because, you save up a bunch of money, you buy the house, you wait a few years and then you have some equity there so you can borrow money and you can buy the next one, right? But eventually, after 3-4 deals, it starts getting tough to qualify for financing and to have the down payment. But after, 2, 3, 4 deals, you start getting some experience, right?
Yeah.
And you start saying, you know what? Hey, I could do this for other people or with other people. And I could add quite a bit of value here because, maybe someone else hasn't done it before, but they've just been talking to me a lot recently about buying real estate. They really want to get in the market and invest. But I know that they're not going to do it unless, they have someone by their side and together we can both benefit each other, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we got started doing joint ventures is, you start getting some experience on your own and then eventually people say, hey, I value that, what you bring to the table. And obviously I don't have the ability to qualify. And then we both have our piece and we put that in the pie and then the pie gets bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. And even for, let's say, high net worth individuals, they will also run into a barrier at some point, right? And if you have a good mortgage broker and you kind of lay out your plan, let's say you're just getting into this, but you've got like really good earnings and you got a whack of cash, they're going to tell you like, okay, for the first 5 deals, we're going to go with this bank.
Yeah.
Because they're good, but only up to 5 deals. And then after that, they won't lend you any more money.
Yeah.
So make sure you max out what you can do with that bank. And then after that, we're going to go to this bank and then maybe this private lender and then that bank, right? To kind of structure it so that you can always qualify, because at some point, no matter how much money or qualifying power you have in Canada anyways, you're going to run out of
the bank's going to say no at some point.
Yeah, not based on anything other than you've got too many properties.
Well, yeah, I at one point I quit my job to do this full time, and that was a big no, right?
Yeah.
Send in your T4. I don't have a T4. Okay, you don't have any borrowing power, and you're not getting a loan.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a big thing too, where people might be self-employed, or they might own the business, and they might not be able to qualify because they don't pay themselves money or enough money to qualify for the deal they want to get into in their business, right? So just as a quick example, like let's say your company might make a couple $100,000 a year, but you keep all that money in the company and you maybe pay yourself, 50, 60 grand just to cover your expenses personally. So when you take that out, obviously, like there's a lot of benefits there for tax savings because you're not paying the tax on all the money you made in your business.
Yeah.
Just the 50, 60 grand you took out. But when you go to get a mortgage, the bank's going to look at you and say, well, show me your income. And if you're self-employed, like they don't like to see, or they like to see that you've paid yourself that money, right? So it becomes this thing, if you want to qualify, you have to basically just pay the tax to the government on the money that you need just to qualify. And you got to do that for 2 years in a row. Usually they want to see 2 years of statements.
Yeah.
And then they'll like be more willing to give you a loan, right? And there's always a risk there too. So you could be paying the tax and then
you don't get it.
You don't get it, right?
Well, I mean, there are options with B lenders as well. So not quite private lenders where you get really high rates, but B lend, which is what we've used. And in that case, we'll often just use stated income.
Yeah.
So then you got to provide your business income to them because they kind of get it. They know that as a business owner, you're not going to pay yourself a huge salary.
Yeah.
Right. Because you do have other benefits, right? Maybe you have a company vehicle and certain expenses are paid for through the company. So they'll just look at like, is this company viable? And are they actually are they making money? If things go bad,
but then they charge higher. They charge
you're going to pay higher. So you are
a little bit, yeah.
Well, I mean, we just renewed, and we're used to being at least 2 points above the normal rates, but we're actually we're right in. I think we're 6% or something, which was like but there's plenty of people paying 6% right now as well, just regular mortgage through a bank. So
yeah.
Anyways, that's just a little side thing before I choke here. that there are some alternatives if you're going through B lenders as well, if you're self-employed.
Yeah, so joint ventures can definitely help you scale quicker, and that's probably why we're getting questions too, right? So I know like people already have a property and they're looking at the next one, right?
Yeah.
And the question always comes up, well, if I don't have like one of the pieces of the puzzle, I can't do it. So what are my options?
Yeah.
Yeah, young people, I think this is a really important strategy to kind of be aware of, because usually you're kind of missing one of the pieces.
Yeah.
Probably money. But it can be a huge way to get into the market. At least maybe you don't own 100% of the property, but you own a piece. So now you're in, right? And yeah, when you're young, you do have more time. You might have more energy, than Mark. Like, he's yawning all the time.
It's true.
And he's really old.
I just have a caffeine IV going off screen.
Oh, man. So, yeah.
Okay, so what are some examples? How do we structure a joint venture?
Yeah, so I have an agreement. I'm not going to pull it up on screen because it's got people's names on it and stuff. But these are legal agreements, 15 pages long. Some you could get are shorter, that more concise and simpler terms. The ones that we have are a little bit more in depth. But we go to a lawyer. We say, look, we want to draft an agreement. Here's the terms of our relationship. I'm doing this. You're doing that, and you want to set. You set who's bringing what to the table and what percentage they're getting out of the deal.
Yeah.
And then, the lawyer will take care of breaking that down into legalese that you never read, or that you should fully understand. But but one big thing is title to the property, right?
Yeah.
So when you buy a house, somebody has to go on title. And if you put both parties on title, that's one way to do a joint venture where you both go on title of the property. You're registered. All right. So if someone did a title search, they would see both your names and know you co-own this thing. And that's legal, and that's fine. And then the mortgage would basically be in both your names, right? Because they're going to look at both of your finances. So that's one way to say, okay, if I can't qualify, but I'm still willing to go on title, I can get someone else who also can't qualify on their own. They can go on title as well, and together we can. So for young people, for example, that might be a good thing, right? Because they have about half the qualifying power each. They combine together, and now the bank's willing to lend on our combined income, and then we can do the deal, and we can both show up on the weekend and
drink beer and maybe do some
I don't know
drywall.
About that. You want to add value to the property.
Oh, yeah, okay. Do the drywall first, then drink the beer.
Yeah. So that's one structure, but not everyone wants to necessarily go on title, right? And not everyone adds value by qualifying for a mortgage either, right? So if you can't qualify for a mortgage, it's not really that valuable to go on title, because you're not going to help qualify. So you might as well find somebody who can, and they can go on title. And I think people who go on title think, is that a big risk? And yeah, it certainly is. Like, there's legal ramifications of going on title, going on the mortgage, right? Because if your name is on the mortgage documents only, then if you default on the mortgage, obviously the bank can come after you personally, and they might not know about the other party to the agreement, right?
Yeah.
So you can kind of have these layers, right? If you put everything, all your names on title and on the mortgage, you're very forthright with the lender, and everything is kind of like, if you have to sell the property, the bank's coming after both of you or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if you do it this other way, you have a separate legal agreement kind of in the background. And I know your lawyer had question marks about that, so don't take this as legal advice, but this is what our lawyer said you could do, and I've got books here to prove it. But yeah, so you would basically put one party on title, get the mortgage, and then the other party, and they would hold it in trust. So they would go on title and they would hold the mortgage in trust for the joint venture, which is made up of both parties, right?
Yeah.
And then that joint venture would have a joint venture agreement that specifies, all the terms of like who's paying for this, how are funds distributed to the various parties, what percentages do they own, right? Because it could be anything, right? It could be 25-75, could be 50-50, and it varies widely based on who brings what to the table.
So. Yeah, and that's legally enforceable, right? So let's say.
So if the guy sells the house because he's on title and he just runs away with all this money, then you could come after him with your joint venture agreement and say, hey, we had this agreement and you were supposed to pay me, 50%. Yeah. So hopefully don't go running away or have to chase him.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the more common setup, right? One person on title, and then you've got a legal agreement to say, hey, this is who we are, and who owns what in this this deal.
Like all the proceeds, all the rents, all the income, but then also all the profits and losses come to that person on title, and then that is held kind of in trust for the joint venture. So if the guy who's on title experiences a loss, that loss also is borne by
the joint venture.
Right?
So do you set up like a bank account under that person's name, or do you have like a joint bank account?
Yeah, so we've done joint bank accounts. Sorry. We've done joint bank accounts for each joint venture and found that to be quite a simple way because both parties can access it. So they can, hey, you got to send a couple grand and put it in, right? Or let's take our cash flow distributions out. You can kind of just access it together. And that works well if you both trust each other, which is what you should do if you're getting into a joint venture together, right? You should trust each other before you do this. Having that joint bank account, you can basically set it up so that the rents automatically go in there, the mortgage comes out of there, the expenses come out of there, like your property tax, your insurance, right, your utility bills, if you're paying for the utilities yourself as a landlord. And then if you have cash flow, which is great, then you distribute that. And what we usually do is like maybe once a year we'll look at the bank account and say, okay, the cash flow has built up, we're going to take each this much money according to the percentage that we have in the deal, and then you roll into the next year, right? And that way you always have a little bit of a buffer there for any unexpected expenses.
And I mean, people will say...
I don't like those unexpected expenses, Mark.
Nobody does.
No.
But I'm sure people will say, so you both have access to this account. How do you know the other person's not going to do this or that or whatever? And I think what you said is you have to trust each other. Like, if you're thinking this going in, then maybe this isn't the right joint venture.
Yeah.
Right? If you already have misgivings before you start, before you set things up, like this probably is not going to work out.
Yeah, it's like when that guy steals all my money, what are my... try not to do that. We do have ones where we hold the account because we are more active, right? So we're doing the construction, we're doing the design, we find the deal, we find the management, like all of that stuff is happening. So we also deal with the transactions. So you have full control. Yeah. And then we pay out distributions as needed, like whenever there's money to distribute, right?
And then give like a yearly account?
Like a statement at the end of the year of what happened in the year. That's usually how it goes.
And so that's even more quote unquote risky for the person you're partnering with because they really have no control or no idea of what's going on daily, but that's probably also what they want, right? They don't want to have to think about it other than like collect a check. And
so we'll give a monthly kind of statement of rent collected and that sort of thing, but more on the property management side. But they some people just don't. They just want their money invested, and then you take care of everything, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
kinda
just
like,
a way of backing off, and
yeah, you buy some mutual funds and like you just get your statements every now and then.
yeah,
And I mean, for you guys, let's say you did do something dodgy, you would be done in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Word
Yeah.
would get out pretty quick, and you would not do another deal.
yeah. Word would probably get out on the podcast pretty.
Yeah, I know I would. I'd be like, Brent's stealing money.
Yeah.
Don't do any joint ventures.
Yeah. So we used to do a lot more of them, but we've kind of toned down and done more fee for service work now in
Yeah.
our company, right?
Yeah.
So we're doing a lot of the same stuff, but it's not like a joint venture where we're going in on this thing 50-50 and we both have ownership, right?
Yeah.
It's just you own it 100% and we do the work. So there's advantages to both kind of models, right?
Yeah, depending on what the investor's comfortable with as well, right? So what are some typical structures that that you would do or that you would recommend in a joint venture, like where one person is just bringing money and the other person is bringing the expertise and the deal?
Yeah, so the most common is probably having one person who's active, who's taking control of the property itself, finding it and renovating it and renting it out and managing it. He might live close by, or she, right? And might have some skills or some intel on the area and the tenants, and they're prepared to put the time in.
Yep.
So maybe they have a part-time job, or they're retired and can handle phone calls at 4 a.m. And then maybe they have a plunger too, just in case.
Yeah, it's important.
Right? Yeah. Well, tools and those sorts of things are valuable, right? Not everybody's a handyman, right? So to have access to tools and stuff so you can do quick repairs, it saves a lot of money. So if someone brings that to the table, that's probably one kind of party. And then the other party that's in this kind of common deal structure would be somebody who can qualify for the loan and has the money. So yeah, it might be somebody who's more advanced, who has more financial clout and just less time, partnering with somebody who has more time, but just doesn't have the finances to make it work. That's probably the most common structure.
What's the ownership structure like then?
So in something like that, depending on the experience of the person doing it and the size of the deal, and whether or not the person who's doing the the active side of it, doing all the construction, is putting any money in, it'd probably be around 50-50. That's anyways the ones we've done. A lot of them are just 50-50, right? Like we do this, you do that, and it works. And if you're not as experienced, you might take a lower equity stake in the property or in the deal, and you might give more to the investor because it's a riskier thing for them. Because it's like, hey, you haven't done this before, so well, I'm going to get 75 or 80% of the profits. So, you take your smaller share, and once you know what you're doing, then maybe we'll do another one, and it'll be bigger.
Yeah. So even on like a 50-50 deal, does it work out financially for the person putting the money in? Yeah.
So on the ones that we've done, so there's multiple ways to structure. Once you have your kind of how much or who's contributing what, right? You have a percentage, let's say 50-50. There's multiple ways to structure how the money is distributed, right? So you could say, we're just 50-50, and any money you put in, you're going to get 50. It's going to just come 50-50, right? So like if we make $100 in cash flow, I get 50, you get 50, right? But for the investor who puts all the money in, they're putting all the money in and they only get half the cash flow or half of the distributions, right? So that's not as attractive. And so a lot of the ones we've done, we've actually structured it similar to the GP-LP structure that we talked about in the past episode, where the investor is entitled to like a preferred return on their money, right? So when they put their money in, they're getting, because they have more money invested than the other party,
Yeah.
they're getting any profit that comes back first, up until whatever the preferred return is. Let's say it's like 8%.
Yep.
Right? So they're getting that first, and then the rest is split 50-50.
Right.
So if that makes sense. Yeah, because this is where it can kind of get a bit confusing for people, is when the money comes out. And then there's always two kind of buckets, right? There's the regular operational cash flow that can get distributed, right? Every month you're going to make some cash flow, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then that has to be distributed. And then there's also the capital distributions when you do a sale or a refinance. Yeah. Then there could be potentially a big chunk of change coming out. And then what do you do with that, right? So that is definitely a big part of the legal agreement.
Yeah.
After you specify the parties and what they're responsible for and the percentage ownership, then we specify how do you distribute the cash that comes out of this thing, or hopefully comes out of this thing.
Well, if you're doing a value add where you're
because we
doing
also
renovations,
we also talk about putting money into it too, right, in the agreement.
Yeah, who puts in what and
if
at what
you
point.
have to spend. Yeah. Anyways, what were you gonna say?
Oh no, I was just saying, like, a lot of the deals we'd be thinking of would be something where you're doing a renovation, or maybe adding an ADU. So then you're going to do a refinance more than likely, like a year into it or whenever everything is done, right?
Yeah.
So then there's going to be some cash coming back out.
Yeah.
So especially for the investor, if they can have a good chunk come back, I think then it's usually still a pretty good rate of return, right? Once you calculate, like, okay, I put in X and I got X back, and then I also have this property. Ideally they're getting their the money they put in back, but I don't think that's reasonable right now, right?
Yeah, it's very tough
Hard to
in
find a
this
deal like
area
that.
and these rates to buy something and then have it value add and then refinance it, pull all your money out. It's tough, but I'd probably say it's not impossible, but you got to buy very low under market.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables there, right? So you got to buy something very much below the market value. You have to renovate it quickly and for cheap. And the renovations that you do have to be adding a lot of value so that the property goes up in value. And then the appraisal has to come in high, which means, like, right now appraisals aren't coming in high because the market's kind of, and then banks are saying, hey, appraise this a little bit lower because we're a little bit risk averse, right? So all those things have to happen. And then you also have to qualify for that higher appraisal. And then, so you probably need the rents to go up too. So all those things have to happen in order for you to get all your money out.
Yeah. But I mean, if you don't get all your money out, that's still...
It's not the end of the world, no.
Well, no, because that's like the optimal best scenario, right?
Yeah.
But that's, that's a bit of a unicorn, I think. You
put
put $100,000 in, you get $100,000
infinity deal or something.
Yeah, because your rate of return, your cash on cash is 100% or more, right?
Yeah.
Which is, that'd be nice, but probably not going to happen in Canada anyways.
Yeah. Call Mark if you're looking for an infinity property.
Okay, all right. So that's sort of how we structure the deals. What kind of deals would you be looking for? I mean, we're sitting here in the GTA. What kind of things are you looking for in terms of joint ventures?
Yeah, so I think joint ventures can they can obviously apply to a wide range of things, but let's just say, so a young person who's looking to buy a house, it might be quite applicable to that situation where they might not have the full down payment, or they might not be able to qualify. Qualification is probably the bigger one, but they're ready to work on the property and they want to do something to it, right? And they might not have all the expertise and they might never have managed tenants before, but they're ready to start trying, right? So that might be a good opportunity to, go to a family member, and the minute you kind of go to a family member, you have to think like less about, this is my property, my deal. It almost becomes like a family deal, right?
Yeah.
Like you're building family wealth rather than, and that's kind of when you bring on a joint venture partnership right away. It's a mutual relationship and you're going to build wealth together. It's not I'm building my wealth, you're building your wealth. It's like, no, we're together. So you have to kind of think about it like that. So yeah, when you start bringing on like parents or uncles or friends or whatever, then I forget what your question was, but then you can all of a sudden, get into a deal right away, quicker, and start renovating, right? And I've seen people recently do that, and like it's done really well because they're getting into the market with a single family home. Yeah, you're asking what kind of deals you're getting into, right? So it could be anything, right? It could be just somebody looking to buy their own house, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to apply specifically to an investment. It could just be a way to get into a property, husband and wife, they want to live with their family, then this is a way to do that. They just buy a house somewhere and
and so they're going to get some quote unquote help from a family member, but really it's not help, it's an investment. Because now that family member owns a piece of that house. Yeah. And then that's got to be spelled out in your agreement. Yeah. But if you're going to do a refi, great. Or if at some point you sell it, then they get that piece back. So it's more of a longer term investment, right?
Yeah. So that works well for parents and children too, who are like, hey, I'm going to, help my kid buy a house, that sort of thing. But yeah if you have a lot of kids, it's like, I got to run out eventually. But yeah. And then other opportunities or deals that work on a bit of a bigger scale. Like we've talked about this before where, it used to be super easy to just buy a house and then rent it out, right, and make cash flow and make it pay for itself. Maybe you can do that in some pockets in the States too, you're talking about. But here and now, if you want to own real estate in Ontario, and there's a strong case for owning it, right, because of all the trends that we've been talking about, you have to do more work to it. And that's where all of a sudden people it might be unattainable for people, right? They're like, I can't do this anymore, so I'm just going to not do it.
Right.
And that's where a joint venture might come in, because say, well, if I bought that property and I wanted to make it work as an investment, I would have to, renovate the house, add a basement, add a detached dwelling, or I'd have to make it turn into a fourplex, or I'd have to sever off the back and put 2 lots and do all this other stuff, right? And that's very capital intensive, time intensive. There's risk there. But if you start sharing that risk or sharing that responsibility across multiple parties and everyone brings something to the table, now all of a sudden you can do a deal, right? Yeah. So while the deals may not seem feasible to one individual, if you don't have the resources and the time, like once you start spreading it across different people, now all of a sudden it can, right? So that's an example. But we talked about private equity last time, and that's a bit almost a different project size too, right? Like joint ventures, you wouldn't necessarily scale that up to like, a condo development. That's not the right kind of deal structure for that sort of thing. Yeah. So it is kind of limited to smaller, more clear-cut deals.
Yeah, so generally you're looking at single-family homes.
It works really well because it's not an expensive legal agreement to get into either, right? Because if you set up a corporation and you have to do all these things and you have to do annual tax filing and all that stuff, that's all of a sudden a barrier to entry too, right? You have this extra cost on top of all your other costs, and the deal better produce enough juice, so to speak, to make that all work, right? But a joint venture is a much lower cost, but it's still a legal way. Like it's a good way to protect yourself, but still do a deal. And it's kind of the cheapest.
Yeah, I mean, you might be looking at what, $1,000 in legal fees or $2,000 versus 10 or 20 grand on a sort of GPLP or more, depending on the size, right? But
and the cool thing is too, like once you have a joint venture agreement and you've done one, you can also copy and paste that agreement and change the names and the terms and
you don't need a lawyer to do a whole new one.
So like the bulk of the legal fees is setting everything up, whereas in a corporation, like you're still gonna have to set up a new corporation and
you have to do the same thing every time.
So it has its spot. It has a kind of a lower lower. It's still big, but it's
Yep.
also smaller than big stuff. Does that make sense,
Yeah,
Mark?
it's not small, but it's smaller than big. Yeah, no, it's clear as mud.
Technical.
Take some notes. Okay.
What else we got?
I don't know. What else?
You're peppering me.
I ran out of pepper.
Oh man.
Yeah, just down to salt.
What are we like?
I have to assault you now. Well, I mean, we talked about why, right? We talked about how you do it, what you're actually doing. Typically, it's going to be the smaller, more entry-level type deals.
Yeah. So one other thing to consider that I just touched on maybe was the contributions, right? So
Yeah.
we want to have a legal agreement that specifies what we're doing, specifies what our percentage interest in the deal is, and specifies who gets paid what. But then you also want to have who has to contribute. So if you're,
If the furnace goes,
if the furnace goes, man, on December 26th or 5th, and so first of all, who's getting the phone call and has to go there on Christmas Eve or whatever to look at it?
yeah.
Is the big, that's probably the more pain. But the other thing is, okay, once we get the bill and it's, $6,000 to fix whatever it is that broke, who's going to pay for that? And it doesn't always have to be the person who put in all the money, right? So if somebody's putting in 100% of the funds to buy the deal or maybe renovate it or whatever, it doesn't have to be that same person putting in 100%. It can be. But it could also be like, 50-50. Say you have a 50-50 relationship, from this point onward, everything that's a capital expenditure, we're going to vet it. Like we're both going to talk about it. We're going to say if it's worth it.
Yeah.
And then we're going to mutually pay for it as well, 50-50. And it kind of works because like we talked about, you have this shared bank account, right?
Yeah.
And that bank account would be paying the expense. So you get the invoice and then one of the guys goes in and e-transfers them the money or whatever. Then you both put in funds into that account to top it up. And then, pretty simple. I think people might think it's daunting when you like joint venture, legal, whatever, but like, it's really, you could have just the basic setup and that's usually actually probably better. Keep it simple, but so and then capital contributions, could go where the guy puts in all the money. But so for example, if you have, a deal where the guy just doesn't have any money, but he brings a lot to the table on the active management side, and the other person puts in all the money, and he's agreed to put in any capital expenditures moving forward that the property itself can't pay for. Because sometimes like you might have $10,000 of cash flow in a year and the furnace goes and you can easily just pay for it, right?
Yeah.
So then you don't need to
maybe
contribute.
also the septic needs work. Or,
Septic. Ooh. Yeah, that's expensive. But yeah, if that person's putting in all the money, then sometimes they're going to have like if they're getting paid, if the agreement specifies that they get paid all their money back first, then that just adds to the amount that they get paid, right? So let's say they have $100,000 in this property, and then all of a sudden they need to spend another $10,000, right?
Yeah.
So they put in another $10,000. Now they're $110,000 into it, and the other guy still has zero.
Yeah.
But they're entitled to that $110,000 when you sell it or when you refinance it, right?
Yeah.
So, which makes a lot of sense. And it's still like for the guy putting the money in, it's still kind of sticking your neck out further because you have to trust that the property over the 20 years that you're going to own it is going to pay that money back.
Yeah.
But when it does pay it back, you get it first, and then the rest is split according to the percentage interest.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to do it. You found that very interesting.
No, I did. No, it's it is good. It's good. Okay. Any other pearls of wisdom you want to throw before the swine?
Maybe one other very important thing, which probably should have talked about right at the beginning, was the exit strategy, because that's huge. So for people who get into these things, like they might be super optimistic and very excited, but then a year goes by and you're like, man, I just want to get out of this. Right? So very, very important part of it is what do we do with this deal when it's done, or
Yeah.
when we want to get out, when one party wants to get out and the other one wants to stay, or when one person wants to sell or they both want to sell. So like that definitely has to be covered in the legal agreement, and
Yeah.
lawyers have different ways of doing this. So we've had different lawyers come up with different clauses for this. And one that we liked was, like, you can call it a shotgun clause, right? So have you ever heard of that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I've heard of that and the Santa Claus.
okay.
I'm more familiar with the Santa Claus.
Yeah. Oh, Mark. So yeah, the shotgun clause, people not familiar, is kind of like, well, I guess the trigger, right? There's a trigger. So,
Yeah.
and the trigger is like one party wants to sell or buy the other person out, right?
Yeah.
So what usually happens is you say, okay, I want to buy you out, or, and then the other, and then they say,
I want to buy you out.
yeah, how does this work? So, okay, so it works like this. So you specify a price, right? So like I would say, I want to buy you out for $500,000. That's what this deal is worth. And I think you like would be happy with that. And then what you can say is buy or sell. So I say, I trigger the clause, and
You pull the
I
trigger.
say the price.
Yep.
And then you, as the other party, get to say whether or not you want to buy or sell at that price from me, right? And
Yeah,
then-
so I'll sell it to you, or you know what? No.
Yeah,
I'm
so
gonna
if
buy
I
from you at that price.
yeah, so if I trigger it and I say like $1 million, then you can say that you're going to sell it to me for $1 million. So therefore I'm at a loss or whatever, right?
So you can't sort of take advantage of the other party by doing
Yeah.
a lowball offer, because they
Yeah.
could come right back at you
And turn it
say,
around. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'll take that offer, but I'll pay you.
Yeah. So it's a great kind of quick way to incentivize, a fair price, so that, and so that this is the other thing to keep in mind with the legal agreement is, like, the legal agreement is there as like the backstop to your relationship, right? So if you, in general course of things, like, you don't just, okay, we want to sell, let's pull out the agreement and see what we're going to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you fire the shotgun at me, and then I'm going to, right? It's more, hey, Mark, you want to sell? No, not really, right? And then, oh, you want to sell now? Yeah, you want to kind of think of it like, well, let's talk about this, right? You work it out mutually together, but if you can't, then it comes
you've
down
got
to
the
this, right?
agreement, yeah.
Yeah, because I've definitely heard some people, like, getting taken advantage of, where they're in a bad financial position, personally, but then the guy who has, half the deal notices that and is like, well, I'm going to try and force you out of this
I'm
thing.
going to give you 50% of the value.
Yeah, by lowballing it. And that's tough, right? But yeah, you hopefully want to get into agreements where you can mutually discuss it first, and if all else fails, and it's just, we have to sell this thing, and the other is, we don't want to sell this thing, then you move to the next step, and that's looking at the agreement. And well, you should look at the agreement, but at least you have a backstop, right? You have something to go off of.
Yeah. So, and you may be doing this with a buddy and be like, oh, I never want to, like, we're always going to be best buds, right? But if you go, I don't know, look 10 years down the road, right? And then look at your past relationships.
Yeah.
And like, are all of them, lots of things change, even family relationships, right? So highly recommended to have that, to have a good exit strategy.
Yeah, and then if you actually do decide to sell, a lot of the time the way is, we get appraisals. If you're at contention with each other, like if both parties are like, you know what, I want that, I want this, and then you both get an appraisal, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm not happy with your appraisal, I want this appraisal, and you come to an agreed value, and then you buy out the other party, or if you're going to sell it, you have to just list it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then it gets kind of scary, I guess, for the person who's not on title. So we talked about, if one guy's on title for, like, in trust for both parties at the joint venture, then he could technically just call up a real estate agent and list the property, and you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So there's, you should have a clause in your agreement that kind of talks about if that happens, or how do I deal with that
Right.
if he just goes and lists it, right? And then do you have any is there any ramifications for you if he just sells it and he sells it for $100,000 less than what the market value was because he just needs the cash really quick and he's out of here? So that's kind of covered in the agreement as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you figure out what the worst case, plan for the worst, right?
Yeah.
But hope for the best.
Yeah.
So that's what they do in Germany too. They plan for the worst, especially around Oktoberfest.
Oh, VP of humor.
Yeah, that's right. I've been developing that joke.
Oh, man.
Okay, well, I think that's a good spot to cut it off before the jokes get really bad.
Yeah.
And as always, if you have questions, email Brent, not me.
Yeah, or no, just reach out to a lawyer,
Oh, yeah.
They'll probably charge you hundreds of dollars. But
yeah, we'll charge you dozens of dollars.
Usually the more expensive the lawyer, the better, I guess. I don't know. If I was a lawyer, I would probably just charge a lot of money.
Next career, Brent.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening, folks. And until next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.